Okay, Reverend Wright, in this economy, what is it that the black church should be doing to help its members get through these tough economic times, do you think?
I would say the same thing the African American church did to help its members get through the stock market crash in the 20s, and the same thing the black church did to help its members get through slavery. When economic times were worse, at least 1,000 times than they are now, because we had full employment with no money. And that is to help its members understand that money is not what matters, and that the love of money is what got us into the mess that we are in today. That money is a means to an end to support families and to provide housing and education, but that the real values of life are the things that surface in hard economic times, and you're not interested in iPods and MP3s and Comcast and things that money can buy, but in cultivating relationships and building strong relationships between people who support each other and who we connect with, what Queen Quet was saying this morning, in terms of what it means to be an extended family and to care for one another, as the black church did, both during the Depression, members of the church, and during chattel slavery.
Let's go back to the top. What brought you to Atlanta
The
today?
H.O.T.E.P conference, I was invited to come and, well, initially to receive the Asa Hilliard Award at the H.O.T.E.P conference, the annual H.O.T.E.P conference. And then Dr. Hill asked me to address the theme. The theme is tripartite, recapturing the greatness of the African American church, academic community, and family. I was asked to address the African American church, the African American academic community, rebuilding that greatness, using Sankofa in terms of going back to the time when the African American church was much different than it is today, and the academic community of Africans living in diaspora was very different. Queen Quet was to speak to the family aspect, so that's what brought me here. Dr. Hill's invitation and his asking me to address those first two parts of this year's theme.
Any reaction to the impeachment of your governor of Illinois, and also what can you tell us about his appointment to the Senate?
I have no reaction. It was quite obvious from the day the FBI broke the story that he was going to be out of office. The only question for people living in Illinois was how soon was that going to be? When they released the tape, they released the transcripts of the tape, the written transcripts, and almost everybody that I know who has laptop or desktop had downloaded and seen the incriminating evidence that would lead legislators, whether any law was broken or not, to want him out of office simply for the notion of offering to sell the office. His appointment, he has a long track record in the state of Illinois as being the first African American who could cross racial lines and get statewide support. And he's a politician, and he got a politician's reward for being a good politician. I doubt it. Had he been a Republican, he would have got appointed. But I think he will serve well. He served the state well in a statewide capacity before.
Reverend Wright, from the Maroon Tiger, the newspaper at Morehouse, speaking to African American students, particularly at HBCUs, what would you say to them in these changing times, political, the new dynamic? What would you suggest and remind African American students, particularly at HBCUs?
I would remind, I guess, I would pick up on the theme of this year's conference, Sankofa. I would remind African American students at HBCUs, first of all, to remember what HBCU is, how they came into existence, and what their primary purpose is. I would remind them to study the track record of HBCUs to show how HBCUs are still graduating every year more, graduating, not admitting, not getting Title IX, Title IV, Title anything money, but graduating more African American baccalaureate degrees and master's degrees and doctoral degrees than all of the white universities in the country put together. I would remind them to know their own story, to learn their story, so that they don't grow up thinking that it's automatic that you can get in. You look at, I was watching ESPN last night, you look at Atlanta, you look at Arkansas, Georgia, Rutgers, Seton Hall, 10 black guys on the court. That's not an education. That's a sport. And there was a time when their grandparents were their age, they could not get in any of those schools. And to know their story and to appreciate the strides that have been made, but not to rest on strides being made so that you got 10 black guys on a basketball court now, or that you have a Barack Obama or a Oprah Winfrey or a Michael Jordan, that the masses and millions of African Americans still are stuck in poverty, that we still are the largest number of prisoners in the criminal injustice system, to not forget those realities as they go to school to get their educations, to make this world a better place. That's what I would remind them.
Is the church still a location where young African Americans can work and to develop their communities?
It's one of them, yes. It's one of them. But any demographic will show you that only about 25 to 30% of African Americans are in church every Sunday. Still 65 to 70% who are not church, who are not thinking about church, who are not trying to go to church, who are not being active members in any church. But if someone is serious about learning their history and developing their spiritual roots as well as the academic, that the church is still the place, a very viable place for them to do that.
As we you touched on this earlier and you just brought it up again, your church history has been one of dealing with poverty and issues that are now somewhat looked at politically. How do you see the role between the church and politics developing now with all of this money coming, well, I should say money supposed to be coming from the government and stuff, but how is the church still got a role of fixing things, and how are you going to cooperate with politicians and so forth?
I would try to answer that in several different ways. You asked 6 or 7 different questions.
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. Yeah.
The first one is that, if you will notice, poverty has not been touched on politically. And nowhere in the campaign did McCain or Obama talk about the poor. It was always middle America, Joe the plumber, and blue-collar workers. The poor were omitted from the political conversations and dialogue, and the poor were never considered in the Wall Street bailouts, and the poor are still not considered as a part of this nation's agenda. The church has been there for the poor historically and is still there for the poor, and I think it should continue to do what it has done. In terms of, what was the second part of your question?
Well, just the interaction now